Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature successful business leaders, authors, top law firms, green energy companies, and more. Today, we're joined by the Chief Information Security Officer at Lyric, Kevin Heineman. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Thanks for being on. Before we get in too deep, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and the hacker's already done damage. A hacker's job is to bypass your security, so a company needs a way of knowing when someone's gotten past their security. That's where CyberLink's intrusion detection comes in. With our 24/7 Security Operations Center, we use a combination of AI and cybersecurity technicians to see when a hacker has successfully bypassed your security. So a bad guy gets past your security, we'll know right away and be able to kick them out. Find out more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. All right, Kevin, for those who aren't familiar, can you tell us about Lyric and your role there as CISO?
Yeah, sure. So I consider Lyric to be a 30-year-old startup. Our product's been around for a few decades, but the company's only been around for a couple of years. The way we were formed is we came out of the acquisition between Optum, Healthcare, and Change Healthcare. When Optum bought Change, as part of that acquisition, they had to spin off their billing solution. They spun that billing solution off. They sold it to a private equity firm, and they rebranded us Lyric. So we have been an independent company for about 2 years, and really an independent company separated from Change Healthcare for really only about 1 year.
Nice. Well, I guess you separated it just about the right time, huh?
We did. Yes, we separated before the breach. But even when that happened, we went and had to go back and double check to make sure that we did disconnect everything, that the data had been deleted and everything else. So we were pretty busy back in February.
Oh, I would imagine, yeah. So walk me through this. So at Lyric, you guys use AI to help your payers. So that, I guess, for those who aren't in healthcare, we're talking now like insurance companies, right?
Right. Yeah. So let me back up a little bit about what our business is. So our customers are the large insurance carriers, the health insurance carriers here in the U.S. And we are part of what they call their adjudication process. So we help with payment integrity. We do what's called claims editing. So when you go to get a procedure, your doctor will put an edit on that, and it goes to the insurance companies, and we help them determine what their payment should be for those providers. So they send us a lot of the claims, and we send back the results of that analysis. So we see a lot of healthcare data. We see a lot of healthcare data and a lot of Americans, and so that data is very sensitive, and it's very important for us to make sure that we keep that data secure. From an AI perspective, seeing a lot of that healthcare data, there are things that we might be able to do to help the insurance companies with payment accuracy, payment integrity, make sure that what the providers are providing is in fact what the health insurance should be paying. So we try to create that equalizer or that fairness when it comes to payment integrity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think when it comes to security, and I think that's, kind of near and dear to my heart, and obviously as CISO, yours as well. So, how are, in terms of kind of, because healthcare is such a huge target right now, and, I think it's mainly because so many have kind of paid ransoms that's made it's such a big target. Are there kind of some good takeaways, lessons learned that you've kind of come across, over recently because of this?
So you're right. And I think that we are only now scratching the surface of how security is going to be changing, particularly in healthcare. There's going to be a lot more on the regulatory side, the compliance side. It's just the activity that's happened in 2024. We're just seeing the beginning of that, and that will have ripple effects for years to come. But I think the way I would address this first is that if we look at Lyric, and Lyric is say we're a 2-year-old company, everything was greenfield. So if you stand up a brand new company, and there's nothing, right? So we had to stand up all the infrastructure, we had to move all the data, we had to move all the customers, all of that stuff from a cyber perspective. You say, okay, well, you have to deal with the foundational components first, right? You have to deal with, and if you look at the NIST cybersecurity model, right, you got to set up your governance model. You have to set up your endpoint model. You have to set up your MFA. You have to set up your SOC and the ability to monitor everything. So all of that stuff has to get stood up and be active and available before you start pushing your customers' data into that. So that's probably the biggest focus that we had in the early stages is just getting everything stood up. And we took a basic approach of, well, the NIST is a great model. It's a great baseline. Let's just take that and start working through each of those various domains to make sure that we have the proper security controls in place. And then once we have that in place, then we can go through an audit process, get the high trust certification, and so on and so forth. So that's the approach. It wasn't anything that I would say would be more in depth or novel than just taking what's already out there.
Yeah. Well, I love that because I think a lot of people hear the term, hear NIST and NIST compliance, and they immediately kind of shut down or want to run and hide because it can be so overwhelming for those who really aren't into security when in fact I think it's such a great framework that helps kind of piece it together and give you, as any good framework should, kind of the framework to kind of implement whatever you need to implement without saying, no, you've got to do X, Y, and Z exactly this way with this these tools. And I think that's a real challenge that a lot of people don't fully appreciate, just kind of putting together that framework, what goes into it. I think a lot of people think it takes a lot of time and money, and it's more of a, I don't know, more of about policy and procedures. It's more about the paper pushing and not so much about the process of going through it and actually implementing these things and thinking through everything. So I guess I'm curious from your perspective, having had that greenfield experience of, okay, let's go. It's all, the entire field's in front of us. How long did that take you? Kind of what was your approach? Was it daunting and took an excessive amount of time, or did you guys find it to be actually surprisingly easy? Because I don't think a lot of people find themselves in that position. Normally it's the ball's been kicked down the field a good ways. Now you've got a mess to clean up. This is a fun new experience, I think, for a lot of people.
You're right. So we didn't have technical debt from that standpoint. However, right, if you start from nothing, that I wouldn't consider that to be easy or not time consuming. Fortunately, the private equity that purchased, they had a playbook. And so they've done this a number of times. So they've come in a playbook. They say, hey, here's our partners, here's our tools, so we could start getting things stood up. It was a tremendous amount of work. It was a long hours, tight deadlines, and we really, really had to push hard. Fortunately, or unfortunately, I missed like the first 9 months of that. So I joined toward the tail end of it. But even with that, there was still a lot of work that we needed to do to get to the end where we were completely carved out from our former parent company. And then we needed to now mature the organization. So if you look at some of these NIST models and things like that, there's a maturity scale, right? There's like a 1 to 5, and you want to kind of get into maybe the 3 range to start off, and then push up to a 4, and depending on where you want to go or how much investment you have, you might even mature further than that. So there was still a lot of work that needed to be done. But the way I would kind of structure this is there's some real key components. Identity is probably a key component. So Azure, and we're 100% cloud, 100% SaaS. So everything relies on identity. And if you don't have tight governance, tight controls around identity, then doesn't matter what else you have put in place. So there's a lot of focus on that on the front end. There was also a lot of focus on the back end around security monitoring, right? So you can't protect what you can't see. So you needed to have good coverage across your enterprise. And then as the enterprise grows, make sure that coverage stays complete. And then you have active monitoring so that when you see anomalies, you can take action against it. Now, I mean, those are two big ones, but I mean, there's a lot of other stuff. There's endpoint. There's a lot of stuff that need to be considered. But I would say if you're going to start somewhere, start in those areas.
Yeah. Now, are you guys largely? I know that it's mostly cloud based, but does that mean that you guys are more kind of fully remote, or is this kind of a hybrid model?
Yeah, no, we're fully remote. So we
Nice.
do have a headquarters. Headquarters is in a suburb in Philadelphia, but it's really a wireless endpoint. There's nothing there. We use the facility for conference and training and large meetings and things of that sort. But no, we don't do any operational work there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, this one's always, I think this is really interesting. And obviously with you guys being kind of uh, a leading edge kind of, technology company, you're on that forefront. And it's nice to see you embracing that, even though a lot of tech companies, you see them struggle with this whole idea of hybrid in person versus just fully remote. So it's nice to see. And I think it's interesting. Has there been any sort of challenges for you guys, or is there, things that you see that you've done that make it an obvious, win for you guys?
Well, I think since the company started post-COVID and post the whole remote work, that there was a comfort level in creating that from the beginning. So we don't have the facilities. We've hired people across the U.S. So there are some concentrations. I'm in Atlanta, and there's some concentration here in Atlanta. But we don't have that large headquarter or the large facility that we're paying a lot of money for. There's kind of a push to get back in the office. So one, we don't have that kind of pressure. Two, from a recruiting side, that gives us, a lot of leeway in finding the right talent because we can look anywhere for that talent, and that's been very, very fruitful for us for both being able to hire quickly and hire really, really good talent. So, in all, I don't think we've had any real issues about the remote work. We have the right tools and technology. We do have some policies like let's have our cameras on during meetings and things like that so we can see each other, because face-to-face stuff is not very often. It's good to be able to see my coworkers during the day. So it's not bad. I have not had any problem. And by the way, I was my entire career, I was always in the office or traveling. It's only been the last couple of years that I've been fully remote, and I like it, and I feel that I'm productive doing it too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many, obvious productivity gains, right? I mean, you don't have it's funny how the water cooler becomes one of these things where it's like, oh, you need that bonding, but it costs so much in terms of productivity, right? I mean, and is that really where people want to get that bonding, at the by sacrificing the productivity? You can't go to work without, you can't go into the office without the constant disruptions and the socializing. And so they're just not productive days. You talk to people who are doing the hybrid thing, and the days that they're in the office are those are sacrifices to productivity. They're like, oh, couldn't wait to get home so I could finally get some work done. And it's like it's funny that the people still struggle with that.
Yeah, our water cooler has now turned into Slack channels. So there are those side channels that go on with a lot of conversation on it. But I guess I want to get back to your point about were there any challenges? Probably the biggest challenge that we would see on this is the onboarding of new employees.
Hmm.
In that it's really incumbent upon the individual that's hired to make sure that those relationships are built, because being remote, it's a bit more challenging. And it's harder because you don't just see them in the hallways, or you're not in can't have side conversations in a meeting before or after meeting. So So that's really probably the biggest thing. But if you're intentional about it, I think you can build really strong relationships remotely. And it isn't that much of an issue.
Yeah, so my wife works for a pharmaceutical company. She's an anesthesiologist, and now she works in global patient safety. And interestingly, they do this kind of like, I don't want to call it mandatory, but they schedule these one-on-ones. Just kind of getting to know everybody as they when the new employees come on, they're just kind of set up with all these one-on-ones, so they're meeting everybody, not necessarily in their team either, people throughout the company, and so kind of building this network of connections. And I thought that's a smart idea. I don't know if other people are doing that, if they kind of mandate that, but I thought that was rather brilliant.
Yeah, one-on-ones are important to do. That's just good management practice. It's really about, building trust and building the relationship both with your team, with your peers, and with your superiors. So it's just good practice in career management, right?
Yeah, it really is. Well, and I'd like to go back to when we were talking about AI, and since you guys are an AI company, and obviously it is the topic du jour, right? How does that? Do you guys integrate AI into other aspects of the business beyond just kind of the product offering?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when I talk to my peers, a lot of the AI that companies are looking at is how do I take a Gen AI tool like ChatGPT or a Bard or something and integrate that into my organization? Either maybe it's a chatbot or customer service or something like that. At Lyric, we're taking a different approach. We feel that the data that we see and the value that we can bring, there's a lot of value that we can add by building our own AI solution. So we have a chief AI officer. We have a team that is building LLMs, and we're training on those LLMs. Now, we want to do that in a very responsible way, right? So there's an AI program, and then there's how do I secure the AI program. So maybe we talk a little bit about that. So in securing an AI model, we take a couple of approaches to it. For one, AI is no different than any other tool. So we want to make sure that we control the access to that AI model. We want to make sure that we control the data of that AI model. So the data that's coming in, we need to know what kind of data it is. We need to know where it's coming from. We need to know how clean it is. And then we need to control on the output side the data that's coming out to make sure that that data that's coming out is, in fact, the type of data that we would like to see coming out of the model. So we kind of do that from a security side, and from that standpoint, and the use cases that we've applied so far, we feel that we've got a decent security program for those AI models.
Nice. Um, so let me ask you, so you guys are fully remote, so no kind of proprietary, no, I guess, company data center. So are you guys more are you Amazon, Google, Microsoft? Without divulging too much, just kind of curious which way you guys went, because obviously you're using a lot of compute power, right?
Yeah.
And so somebody made a decision and crunched some numbers, and there was a good reason for it. So I'm just kind of curious if that's something you can share in terms of, oh, we went with X for Y reason.
Yeah, so we're in AWS. I can say that that's not a secret or anything. And maybe I should qualify it. The large language models that we're generating, they're nowhere near something of a chat GPT. So when you read these things, it was $100 million to train the model or $1 billion to train the model. We're nowhere near that type of a training algorithm. So but it's not insignificant from a cost perspective, and it's something that we are very sensitive to because obviously we're in a business to make money, and that would be a big cost for us.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great point, because I think when people hear that, instantly you think it's cost prohibitive, right? I mean, unless you've got some great backing, you've got a great plan. The training alone is going to be astronomical. Can you give us some sort of idea that either, yeah, it's rather astronomical and cost prohibitive, or no, it can be done in a relatively, affordable way, obviously relative. Is that something you can talk about?
Yeah, so you're getting a bit out of my realm in that,
Right,
my
right,
job is to make sure things are secure, and I'm not dealing as much with the AI teams.
right.
But I think it is something that is, I wouldn't necessarily say affordable because it's expensive, and you do have to be very, very careful, because if you do continual learning and things like that, you can drive the costs up very, very quickly. So we have to be very intentional about how the training works, and there is a lot of analysis and a lot of preparation that goes into the planning for the actual training of these models. So, and then we need to have continual monitoring of those models so that we can make adjustments to the algorithms and see the output of those adjustments. And we do have subject matter experts that come in and help with looking at how the models are adjusting and then making decisions on how those algorithms should change. And so if you stay on top of it and you really build a strong program around it, then I think it's something that companies could start looking at, particularly companies that have lots and lots of data to build new and innovative solutions with AI. Yeah.
Well, let's get back to the security side a little bit. Now, as the CISO, kind of there's a real challenge there, right? You've got these AI models, you've got these, you've got folks working on that, and your job is to make sure everything stays secure, and not being kind of in the weeds on that. What are kind of your how do you go about, not making sure that you're integrated enough to be able to say, oh, this is secure, versus, like, right. You see where I'm going? So, there's a real challenge there when you're not actually in the weeds doing it, but you're responsible for making sure that what they're doing in those weeds stays secure. So how do you go about that? What's your approach?
So when you look at AI, a lot of people think of the generative AI of where they're okay. I could have intellectual property being lost because I've got some prompt, right, and I can put stuff into that prompt and then it goes somewhere, and I've lost control. But there's also AI that you have control of the data. There may not be a prompt at all, right? You're ingesting data, and the algorithm that you're building is an algorithm on that data that is then going to produce an output. So from a cyber perspective, we can look at, if I take it back to the data governance or the AI governance, at an executive level, we have the ability at the company to say, these are the types of use cases that we want to build and add value to it. And then once I understand those use cases, then I can build security models around it. We have not delved into, I think, where you were going is saying, okay, we're just going to give all of our employees some sort of prompt and they can type whatever they want into it and it goes off into a model. That's not the type of use case that we're building. In fact, our first use case, we are building using public data, and taking that data and synthesizing that for some internal resources, so they are better able to consume that data and are more productive in their job. So it's I think a novel and creative way of leveraging AI to increase productivity for an employee group.
That's wild. Can you give us some kind of, examples there, what you guys are looking to do there? That's, if you can.
Yeah, sure. So, we are in the payment integrity space. So think that there's new medical procedures that come out all the time, and those new medical procedures need to get paid for through insurance companies. And so there's a process that they go through to say, okay, this is how those procedures should be paid, and here's the criteria for getting paid. The amount of data that you have to go through to kind of sift through all that kind of stuff is just a tremendous amount of data. And if we can take that, summarize that data, and provide that to an expert, they will be more productive in their job and in being able to make those types of decisions.
Super cool. So, I think I'm always fascinated by the kind of the background that our guests have had it in the IT and cybersecurity space, and how nobody seems to have the same sort of
Yeah.
path. it's fun and it's interesting, but people come from all different directions. Can you kind of share with us kind of your path and story, and and any kind of tips you've learned along the way to help others follow in your footsteps?
Sure. So, I've got enough gray on the beard that when I graduated, it was before the internet. And I'd probably say it was before Windows. Um, but I got out of school, and I guess I kind of categorized my career in three parts. First part was I'll call it consulting. So it was companies like Ernst& Young, AMS. We did large scale custom mainframe development. And then that evolved into ERP solutions. So this is even pre-SAP and that kind of stuff. And I had a number of different roles throughout there. I did some development, I did some testing, I did some business analyst. So it kind of saw the life cycle of the SDLC. That was good exposure early in my career. Then I left that and I moved in-house. Went through a couple of startups, security startups, Spy Dynamics, Nabala is a couple of them. So that's kind of got my exposure into cyber, but that was on the vendor side. But that's kind of how I started learning the space. And I did. And I ran engineering teams, so the software development team. So did that for about 10 years, and then I moved in-house and into cyber programs, kind of understanding the domains, starting with application security, moving into other areas, working my way up the chain, and then finally got the CISO seat. So this is my second CISO seat that I've had, and I've been a CISO now for 3 years.
Congratulations. Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. And I think very helpful. So I started out, early, programming as well. And I think it's so helpful to have the kind of fundamental understanding of what's going on under the hood, right? So you kind of start from from that level, the engineering, if you will, and it's a lot easier, I think, versus coming at it fresh and new and not understanding what's really going on in the software, not really I don't know. I may be a little biased in that regard, but I've always found that to be very, very helpful.
The technology has changed so much since I started in my career that whatever skills I had back then are irrelevant now. The skills that I think are critical would be things like curiosity, wanting to continually learn. Something else new comes out, and you're like, oh, hey, that's interesting. How can I apply it to what I know? And the individuals that are good at doing that and evolving and continually improving in their skill sets and their backgrounds, I think are the ones that are more successful. Individuals that don't like to change as much. And I lived through the mainframe to client server age. If you remember back in those
Yep.
days, there were people kind of stuck in their ways. That those individuals, I think, are going to be the ones that are going to struggle more. And like now we've got new tech, we've got AI, right? So there's a lot of hype around this, and we are on a hype curve. So where are we on the hype curve? I think has a lot of debate. But in my opinion, the individuals that are adapting to that, learning that, seeing how that can now be applied to the business are going to be the ones that are going to be more successful if you look at their careers in 10 years from now.
Well, and I think this will be really interesting because when you and I started early on, you could know a large chunk of what was known out there. You could be a subject matter expert in a lot of stuff, and now you're lucky if you can be an expert in
That's true.
one thing because there's just so much more. It's advanced so rapidly, and I think it's interestingly. You rewind a few years and everybody was like, you got to make sure your kids learn how to program. Everybody's going to learn how to, and that I think was obviously bad advice, right? Because that's being replaced by AI. And if you got kids who are on that path, and now it's like, that's going to be, the AI is going to take coding out of our hands. It's great, it's super powerful when it comes to coding now, and it's going to be incredible in the future. But if you were all about coding and you really got into the syntax and that was your thing, you're going to have a hard time with a job in the not too distant future. So I'm kind of curious from your perspective, having seen what you've seen, and being in the AI space and kind of in that startup world, you're right on the kind of cutting edge of all of it. Where do you see it going for people? What advice do you give those young ones coming up, who are looking to get into tech, into AI, into what should they be studying? Where should they focus their studies, if you will?
Well, to your point, it's such a broad spectrum, and there's so many opportunities that I'm not sure that could give a specific advice around that. I think, and I've got two sons that are recently graduated from college, and so the advice that I would give is the new technology, so AI that's coming out, is a tool, and I would advise to guard against, and I heard this term and it's great, AI obesity. So using AI as an enabler or as a crutch so that I don't have to learn, right? It's the one, I'm just going to go use AI and it's going to write my paper for me. Well, I didn't learn anything through that process. But using AI as a tool, as a productivity tool, then yes, that will be something that would be very, very beneficial. So go to coding, right? I don't think we're going to get rid of coders anytime soon. But I think AI as a productivity tool to help you become a better coder, that is something that I would encourage people to do. So learn the basics and then use that to help really accelerate your skill set.
I love it. And I think I love that AI obesity. I think that just kind of puts it all into one little expression, doesn't it? Because people really do. I think humans have a tendency to be very lazy. And I think that's helped us kind of progress, right? But at the same time, I think that's an ongoing battle. Whether you're talking about health, whether you're talking about your career, you've got to fight that desire, that laziness, and use it to be productive, not lazy. And I think that's such a great distinction. So yeah, I'm also gonna steal that one, that AI obesity. I think that's brilliant.
Let's get it trending.
That's right. Let's do it. Well, Kevin, this has been absolutely fantastic. But before we go, can you tell everybody where they can find out more about you and more about Lyric?
Sure. So you can find me on LinkedIn, and it's Kevin Heineman. Just search out there. You'll find me. I don't think there's a lot of me. And Lyric, lyric.ai is our company website. You can go out there and learn more about it. There's a careers button if you're interested in learning more about some opportunities that we have at the company. And I'm happy to connect with anybody that reaches out to me.
Fantastic. All right. Thanks again, Kevin.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.